In a peaceful park, Thomas Miller, a respected black teacher, was handcuffed before stunned bystanders, accused of a crime he didn't commit. The police saw him as a scapegoat to hide their failures, not a man seeking justice. What happened next will shock even those who've seen it all. But let's start at the beginning. It was a serene afternoon in Millwood Park, where the rustling of leaves and laughter of children created a peaceful symphony. Thomas Miller, a well-respected high school teacher and community mentor, sat on a weathered bench, grading papers and soaking in the sun. Known for his unwavering dedication to his students and his role as a leader in the local neighborhood, Thomas embodied integrity and decency. Suddenly, the tranquility was shattered by the blaring sirens of a police cruiser. Detective Roger Carson and Officer Mike Fisher, notorious figures in the 7th Precinct, stormed onto the scene. Without explanation, they approached Thomas, demanded his identification, and informed him that he was under arrest for his alleged involvement in a violent armed robbery earlier that day. Stunned and confused, Thomas protested, insisting he had been nowhere near the crime scene. "There's been a mistake," he said, his voice firm yet calm. "I was at home grading papers this morning." The commotion drew the attention of nearby park-goers, who watched in silence, their expressions a mixture of shock and unease. Among them were neighbors who had long whispered about the precinct's history of racial profiling and heavy-handed tactics. The murmurs began to spread like wildfire. "Not him," someone muttered. "This man's a pillar of the community." Despite Thomas's calm demeanor and clear denial, Carson and Fisher moved methodically, their body language revealing an unsettling determination. As Thomas was led away in handcuffs, whispers turned to concerned stares, and some bystanders captured the scene on their phones. Behind the scenes, the truth about Thomas's arrest was far darker. Detective Carson was under pressure to cover up a botched undercover operation that had led to an innocent civilian being injured. Desperate to deflect attention, he fabricated evidence to implicate Thomas, knowing his skin color and clean record would make him an easy target in their system. Emily Davis, a rookie officer new to the precinct, stumbled upon the inconsistencies in the case. Torn between her moral compass and fear of retaliation, Emily voiced her concerns. Carson's sharp response was chilling. "You're either with us or against us. Stay quiet if you want a career here." Thus began Thomas's fight against a corrupt system determined to silence him. Thomas Miller sat on the cold, hard bench in his cell, his head bowed and his hands clasped tightly together. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting a harsh glare on the concrete walls. Humiliation and disbelief weighed heavily on him, each moment a struggle to reconcile the reality of his situation. A respected teacher, mentor, and family man, Thomas had spent his life inspiring others, yet here he was, falsely accused and treated as a criminal. His wife, Angela, was his anchor through the ordeal. Fierce and unwavering, Angela had long been a passionate advocate for civil rights, using her voice to challenge injustice. Refusing to let Thomas endure this alone, she reached out to Samuel Carter, a renowned civil rights attorney with a reputation for dismantling corruption. Samuel agreed to take the case, recognizing it as more than a fight for one man. It was a battle against systemic racism and abuse of power. Meanwhile, Emily Davis, the junior officer who had witnessed the fabricated evidence and coerced witness testimonies, wrestled with her conscience. She began secretly documenting everything: altered surveillance footage, inconsistent police reports, and pressure placed on witnesses to conform to the fabricated narrative. Every step she took was a calculated risk, her heart pounding at the thought of being discovered by her superiors. The warning from Detective Carson still echoed in her mind: "Stay quiet, or you'll regret it." As the prosecution unveiled their so-called evidence, including doctored surveillance footage that placed Thomas at the crime scene and statements from witnesses coerced under threat, It was clear the system had stacked the deck. Angela, however, was relentless. She harnessed the power of social media, sharing Thomas's story with the world. Posts went viral, igniting outrage. The hashtag justice for Thomas began trending, drawing attention to the case and inspiring others to share their own experiences of police misconduct. Protests erupted in the community, with Angela at the forefront, organizing marches and rallies. Banners bearing Thomas's face flooded the streets, chants of "Justice now" echoing through the city. As public support grew, it became clear this was no longer just a local issue. It was a movement for accountability and change. The trial of Thomas Miller opened to a packed courtroom, the tension palpable in the air. Reporters jostled for position in the back rows, while supporters filled the seats, many wearing buttons and holding signs reading #Justice for Thomas. Despite the pressure, Thomas sat stoic, his shoulders squared and his jaw set. He knew the odds were against him, but the truth was on his side, and he was determined to prove his innocence. Samuel Carter, a towering figure in the legal world, wasted no time dismantling the prosecution's case. With a calm but relentless demeanor, he began exposing glaring inconsistencies. The surveillance footage, touted as definitive proof of Thomas's guilt, was shown to have been edited. Carter pointed out discrepancies in timestamps, the unnatural skipping of frames, and how the footage conveniently obscured the suspect's face. Witness testimonies were also scrutinized, revealing coercion and intimidation tactics used by the officers to secure statements. Meanwhile, Emily Davis, the young officer burdened by the weight of her conscience, made a decision that changed the course of the trial. Overcoming her fear of retaliation, she took the stand as a whistleblower. Her voice trembled at first, but gained strength as she recounted how files had been tampered with and evidence altered to frame Thomas. The courtroom fell silent as Emily produced an internal memo from Detective Carson, explicitly instructing officers to suppress exculpatory information. The most damning moment came when Emily played audio recordings she had secretly made. In the chilling tapes, Carson and Fisher were heard conspiring to use Thomas as a scapegoat to cover up their failed operation. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, and even the judge's expression hardened as the extent of the corruption became undeniable. Adding to the defense's momentum, Samuel presented irrefutable proof of Thomas's innocence. Multiple witnesses confirmed his alibi, stating he had been seen at a local store during the time of the robbery. A time-stamped digital receipt from his purchase sealed the argument, placing him miles away from the crime scene. By the end of the session, the courtroom buzzed with energy. The scales of justice were tipping, and for the first time, it seemed that truth might prevail over corruption. The tension in the courtroom reached its breaking point as the judge reviewed the overwhelming evidence in Thomas Miller's favor. The silence was deafening as he adjusted his glasses and spoke firmly, his tone leaving no room for ambiguity. Given the compelling evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Miller has been wrongfully accused. The charges are hereby dismissed, effective immediately. Relief flooded Thomas's face, his stoic resolve softening into a rare, heartfelt smile as Angela gripped his hand tightly. Applause erupted from the gallery, supporters cheering through tears as the weight of injustice lifted from Thomas's shoulders. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, he continued, his voice grave, I am ordering an independent investigation into the practices of the 7th Precinct, particularly regarding Detectives Carson and Fisher. In a dramatic turn, Carson and Fisher were arrested just hours later. Cameras captured the once untouchable officers being led away in handcuffs, charged with corruption, obstruction of justice, and falsifying evidence. The image became a powerful symbol of accountability, sparking hope that even the most entrenched systems of abuse could be dismantled. Outside the courthouse, Thomas stood before a sea of reporters, his voice calm yet resolute. "This isn't just about me," he began. "It's about every person who has been silenced, every family torn apart, and every life destroyed by corruption and systemic racism. This case has exposed a broken system, and now it's on all of us to fix it." Emily Davis watched from the edge of the crowd, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Though she had been ostracized by her colleagues, the outpouring of gratitude from the community gave her strength. Strangers approached her with thanks, calling her a hero for standing up against corruption. For the first time since taking the stand, she felt a glimmer of pride. As the media storm surrounding Thomas's case grew, it ignited a nationwide movement for police accountability. Investigations were launched in other cities, communities demanded transparency, and grassroots campaigns gained momentum. Thomas's story became a rallying cry for reform, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, justice could prevail when people stood together.